Welcome back to Touchline live here in Pointe FM 99.1 with Vernon Edwards Jr. and Vernon Spring. And we have our first guest with us this morning, Springs.
And we are talking to somebody who will have to call us one of the top football coaches out of the Caribbean. His name is Lenny Taylor. Lenny, good morning. How are you?
Morning.
Welcome to our special program here in Antigua Barbuda. My co-host Vernon Edwards and myself, we once again salute you for your contribution and continued hard work to football.
Thank you very much.
Talk to us. Who is Lenny Taylor? And I know the CV is long.
Now living in Fort Lauderdale. Did coaching stints in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, St. Kitts Nevis, and worked in the U.S. for a long time, and now involved somewhat in the technical department of Island Cup.
All right. Now, Lenny, let's talk about your stint in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And as you know, this is a tough time for the folks there in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, as we've got, as what we said, an eruption of the volcano. But let's talk about your stint first in St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Yes, I started in St. Vincent and the Grenadines in, I think, in 92. Yes, 92, with the Caribbean Professional Football League that started with about 8 franchises. I was involved with the St. Vincent and the Grenadines franchise, and that's how I got to St. Vincent. Of course, you know, the league played for about 3 years before it folded, and after it folded, I was asked to work with the national team as coach. And that's it. All begins there. 93, I coached a Shell Cup team. 94, I went back to Florida. 95, I came back and I did the national team. And we ended up becoming runners-up for the Shell Caribbean Cup and represented the Caribbean along with Trinidad and Tobago to the 1996 CONCACAF Gold Cup.
How would you rate your time during St. Vincent? How would you rate your spell there before we get to St. Kitts and Nevis?
Well, it's a wonderful time. A very small island, of course, about 110,000 people. Went to the Shell Cup final undefeated and did the impossible, beating Cuba, who no one in the Caribbean has beaten in a decade, and rose to number 90 on the FIFA list. Build with the average age of about 22 years old. The team was average 22 years old. Build it with about 8 players went on to play professional football. It was one of the better and most significant part of my football career.
Now, Lenny, how you came to St. Kitts and Nevis? Because, you know, I was hearing about the name Lenny Taylor, and, you know, once you're involved in football, you'll be following the coaches and, you know, what St. Vincent and the Grenadines were executing to the entire Caribbean. How you got lured to St. Kitts and Nevis?
Well, there's a gentleman called Chris Anderson who was involved with El Sporto. And El Sporto was one of the sponsors of the St. Vincent and the Grenadines national team when they went to the Gold Cup. And he, you know, introduced me to Mr. Peter Jenkins, the president of the FA at that time. And we talked about the possibility of doing St. Kitts. I was brought on temporarily to do two World Cup matches against Haiti, one in Florida and one in St. Kitts. And after that experience, I thought, well, when asked to do the national team permanently, the discussion was, well, only if we can begin with a development program that will start building from the ground up rather than trying to place in the World Cup, which is practically not very possible, but to bring the youth players through a development pathway and introducing the coaching education program for the local coaches. Mr. Jenkins accepted that would be the way, and I jumped on in 2005.
Now, you brought a new model, Lenny, to St. Kitts and Nevis football because, as you rightly said, you were concentrating on youth development. What were your challenges as the technical director during that period of time, 2005, 2008?
Well, it's customary that the people in these islands placed their importance on playing in the World Cup or with their senior team. You know, I believe that the only way you're going to get to compete in Central America and North America is that you have to have a 3 to 5 year program where you can bring players through the developmental pathway from under 13s on up into the national team, which is the longer way. The challenges were people wanted the senior team to be successful overnight. In other words, I call that the microwave development. It's not done like that any part of the world. And the support for going through that process was quite controversial. And I stuck with it, and it eventually started bearing fruits with winning the under-20 Caribbean championship, and coaches were started to be developed, but it was too slow, and I think, you know, a larger portion of the football public wanted that immediate gratification, which is not possible. So those were my major challenges.
When you look back at both your stints in St. Vincent and the Grenadines and stints in St. Kitts and Nevis, give me a comparison, which you would have enjoyed. I know you would have taken St. Vincent and the Grenadines to the Gold Cup stage and so, but let's look at the styles of footballers.
Well, it was wonderful in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Like I said, the average age was 22 years old. So we had 17 and 18-year-old players as a majority of the team. That team served the country for a decade because the majority of the players were young. And even after I left, the team was successful. So compare that to St. Kitts Nevis. I believe that with about 65, 70 coaches who were introduced to the D license at that time. And remember, that's prior to CONCACAF doing the D license in the Caribbean. So the philosophy was set. The youths were introduced with a national team beginning at the under 13 level. And look back over 16 years after I left St. Kitts Nevis, I still see the development that paid off with the coaching staff. For example, today the technical director, Pedro, is one of the students from the early coaching education program. And St. Kitts have become competitive for the last 15 years. So both were successful, but I think that St. Kitts has the edge because their longevity was longer. And even up until today, some of the players who started with me back in 2005 is playing national team football.
Now, let's look at Caribbean football, Lenny. And like I said, you've been around and you sit from on the outside looking in still. Why has Caribbean football not gone to the next level?
I do, like I says, the microwave mentality, which is around the Caribbean. We want it today and not a long-term development philosophy, which will help these islands continue to grow and able to compete with Central America and North America. So let's go back to the earliest tournament, the youngest tournaments that are played in the Caribbean, the under 15s. If you look back to the under 15s over the last decade, my research tells me that the Caribbean countries haven't done well in the CONCACAF under 15, and they're losing by large scores of 5, 6, 7, 8-0. If you're not able to compete at that age, it is very difficult for you to compete at the under 17s, the under 20, the under 23, and the senior national team. So we have to examine what we're doing, and we have to come up with a cultural development. We in the Caribbean have special traits. We can't be like Central America or North America. So our philosophy of development needs to be one in which we develop a philosophy for the Caribbean, rather than trying to emulate Central America or North America, who has a different culture, and culture plays a very important role in football. This is why the South Americans play a certain way, the Europeans play a certain way. We have to identify what our challenges are in the game, fix those challenges, and move forward into the 21st century with a whole different mindset in development.
Now, it's interesting that you talk about that, Lenny. My co-host Veronica Edwards, he also strongly feels that the amount of money that is being spent by a number of the smaller federations to be thinking about going to the World Cup, he's always advocating that you should concentrate on youth development. For some strange reason, I think it seems to be a Herculean task for most administrators, because they're not putting any systems in place to say, okay, listen, let's try and see if we could get to the Women's World Cup, whether it's the under 20 or the under 17 or whatever. But where should the coordination come from? Because what we've been finding, Lenny, over the years is that there's a big rift between the governing body for football and the ministry or the government who have the young footballers in the schools. So there's a clear pathway, there's a breakdown in communication.
Yes, well, technical people and federations, for example, in the Caribbean, we don't have the club structure, the youth club structure like you do have here in North America or in the other parts of the world. So most of the youths are in the schools. And because of lack of financing, it is difficult for clubs to run their own youth development program because it takes money. So if schools and federation merge together, the kids are in school, there's a discipline structure already in the school. So either the football clubs or the federations have to adapt a school and use that as their youth development program, but both has to come together to get that job done because it takes money to run a youth development program. I would also recommend that the football federations, I remember when I started in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, there was no FIFA subsidy, absolutely nothing. Not even an office, you were operating out of the back of a car. When I went to St. Kitts, it was $225,000 a year for the subsidy. Now, we were complaining that money. Now it's millions of dollars. It is not channeled properly in youth development, and some of those funds should go into youth development through the schools. The senior clubs must have a youth program, and if you begin at under 12 or under 13, the next year that group goes to under 14, under 15. Then you bring a new group in. There is enough money in the Caribbean now to make us as strong as Central America or North America, but only if a majority of that money is invested in youth development. So schools, football federation, all stakeholders in football must work together to have a strong youth development program which will supply senior teams as they go up the ranks. I think the biggest letdown is at that point.
Mr. Taylor, Veron said was junior here, and then I played with the Antigua national team for over 20 years, and I feel like in the Caribbean that we have a hard time, especially the small islands, coming to the reality that we are setting unrealistic goals, and especially the goal of going to the World Cup, which is not going to happen anytime soon. And that we funnel all these monies into our senior team instead of, as you say, into youth development, trying to get these youngsters into universities or on professional trials at an early age and into certain environment where if that happens, then maybe we can get an under 17 youth team to a World Cup, and if that is successful, these players will go on and get professional contracts, and maybe in 10 years time, maybe if we're lucky enough, have a good run at the World Cup. But for some reason, I just feel like we have unrealistic goals as to what we want to achieve within a certain time. Is your feeling on that?
I concur with you. And if we look back at the last 40 years of Caribbean football, you can't continue doing the same thing and try to get a different result. And it behooves me to see why we would continue doing those same things and look to qualify for FIFA tournaments. So I concur, we need to stop, evaluate what we're doing, get our heads out of the clouds, come back to reality, go and compete for the youth world tournaments, try to be successful there, yes, and the 17s, but they must be kept together to 20s, and they must be kept together to 23, so into the national team. And if we continue the way that we're going, we're going to get the same results, and that is insanity. So I concur with you on that sentiment.
But Lenny, why when we come out of the Caribbean, we beat up against each other? St. Kitts Nevis, Trinidad, Jamaica, And as soon as we get to the you know, what we say, the South Americans, the Mexico, and we move into that area there, we don't go past them. What are they doing, Lenny, that we are not doing?
Well, they have a structure of football, and all of these places have that strong development of youth football. So, if you look at the development pathway, which is grassroots, pre-academy, academy, professional, that's the development pathway. Every other country, by the time you're 18 years old, the players are signed professionally. In the Caribbean, at 18 years old, we're still teaching passing, receiving, shooting. That should be in place already. So without a structured youth development, you can get to 20, 21 years old and teaching the basics of football. See, so we must change what we're doing. I do believe that the powers to be don't care if we are successful, because for them it's an easy 3 points. Before they play the Caribbean teams, they already think, well, it's 3 points in the column. We're going to beat them. We're faster. We're stronger. Yeah. So all of those elements which we can compete with within CONCACAF is speed and strength. But the subtleness of technique, individual tactics, group tactics, team tactics, we're very weak in those areas. Also, whenever we're playing those teams, it's 3 weeks, 4 weeks before we play that competition. We're running around to get players to put together to play those guys. Those guys already, 2 years, a cycle before they play you, they have that organization. So by the time you play them, they have played 50, 60 games already. With you running around 2 months before you play competition, you're automatically going to be slaughtered. So through the developmental pathway, players has to be kept in a pool, have regular training, play matches. The game is the best coach. So players have to be able to play. Now with the funding that's coming in, we should be playing much more matches in these places. So when the Caribbean team leaves to go to Canada, Mexico, United States, the hugeness of the occasion already overwhelms them. So they have lost the game before they go on the field. So the whole structure of our development has to change.
Lenny, we talk, you made an interesting point. I remember we had a coach one time from France, and he said that players in Antigua and Barbuda, St. Kitts, and a lot of these islands are very quick, they're very strong, they tackle very hard, which can make it uncomfortable for opponents from other places. Do you think we don't really coach and prepare our players to use the strengths that we have enough? And we always see teams trying to play like Brazil and play like Mexico and have 10, 15 passes when our development is not really structured that way?
You are correct. Again, we go to culture. The culture is very, very strong. In those areas, that's their culture and that's their strength. We are fast, we're quick. We have some technique, some dribbling ability, but that the dribbling has to be used as a weapon. But it has to be included with our strength, which is speed, hard tackling, like you said. We have to play a lot of counter-attacking football, intermingle with some interpassing. That should be the philosophy of the Caribbean, because those are our natural gifts that we have. Again, another area in which we need to improve is our aerial play, our heading, attacking heading, defensive heading. We're better at defensive heading than attacking heading. How many times do we score goals from crosses from the flanks? So, yes, we need to really look what we're doing. I think the stakeholders from across the region needs to come together and discuss the challenges that we have and come up with some methodology of how we can move forward. I think that's the way that we must go.
Lenny, you are heavily involved in the Island Cup. This is a project which has started way back, Major League Soccer, Nets will shake. You've been around from that inception of that era. We now have the situation now where we have a number of trials that have been taking place. Island Cup Open. My co-host here has a couple of youngsters coming out to the US and tell him that we are trying to see if we could quietly see if everything could be all right in the Caribbean so that at least you can be able to come and have a look at some of those youngsters. What's been happening in the States now with some of the trials that have been conducted over the last couple of weeks?
Well, we began looking at players in the diaspora of Caribbean background, either if they're born there or even if they're born in the US, we start to gather those kids together. And let me emphatically state that football in America, the passage through the pathway is not very clear for people of the underserved communities. So we have started to looking into the Caribbean communities to find these kids. And we have done 4 trials, and there's 50 players that came together over last weekend. And we begin the preparation of identifying those kids so that, as I see Island Cup as a vehicle that may be able to deliver our young people into the pathway of professional football. I do believe that this is a multi-billion-dollar business. And we as Caribbean people are on the periphery of the multi-billion-dollar business. We're playing football, but not in the business of football. We're not creating enough pathway for our young people to use the game as a vehicle for the professional life. So with these players, we're hoping that Island Cup can be that vehicle that can expose these players to the wide world of football. I think the concept is a good one where legends are mixed into the group, young Caribbean players, young diaspora players with legend. I think that's a pathway that can lead these kids to be seen and to be delivered into the belly of football. Now let's look at in Europe. Look at the Bundesliga, the amount of young Africans that are playing in the Bundesliga, making millions of dollars. Yeah? Where are the Caribbean players? There are 2 players that we can think about. Sterling, who was born in Jamaica, but was raised and developed in England, make a lot of money, ton load of money. And the other kid at Bayer Leverkusen, we call him Chippy. Other than that, we cannot find Caribbean players in big money football in the world. So something is wrong. You can't go to Europe to try out when you're 24, 25 years old. It's not gonna fly. Nobody's interested in you. You're too old already. We have to present these kids at 17 and 18 or even earlier. Those 2 players that I called their names, Sterling and Chippy, they went to Europe and they played in the academy and segued into the second team all up into the first team. So I think Island Cup has this ability to find the young Caribbean kids, the young diaspora kids, put them with the legend, and I think that's a pathway that has a strong possibility of being successful.
No, Lenny, you talked about the business of football and the movement of getting players out. Jamaica seems to have done an excellent job so far because, as you rightly said, they understand the movement of getting players. We were speaking to the president of the Jamaica Football Federation. I think it would have been on Wednesday.
Wednesday?
Tuesday. And, he was talking about the as you said, the planned pathway of moving players around and the players who are moving around into the different areas. Is it a point, Lenny, that the administrators themselves are holding on to their old ideas rather than trying to get consultants, people like you who've been in the football industry out there, understand the connection and try and get people like you involved to be able to help to move players?
Yes, I do believe, and I will say this, and a lot of people think it's controversial. I think the success of the Caribbean football development will be better served if they find Caribbean people in the diaspora who understand what's taking place to assist in the youth development in the Caribbean, because they have a little better understanding of that first world approach. One of the things that I criticize most of the time, those people are brought in who do not understand the culture of the people, and they might be good technicians or tacticians or whatever you want to call them, but culture is stronger than everything else in sports. And the success of the Caribbean, they need to go into the diaspora, whether it's US, whether it's Europe, wherever, with people who have a Caribbean background in helping with the development of the education. For the last 40 years, we're not looking at our people, we're looking outside of our culture to bring coaches and developers into the Caribbean. And it has not been successful. Also, it's also for me very controversial to continue bringing players, even if their background is Caribbean, from the diaspora to our national teams, because you don't have enough time to prepare tactically. They're great players, they're great professional players. But just by doing that process consistently, it tells me that there is no development and you're foregoing the talents or the nuggets that are in your islands for a microwave success. So that whole stuff needs to be cleaned out, looked at, taken care of, set it on a solid foundation, and I think maybe our football will have a chance. For example, here in America, you have many Caribbean coaches who are doing so well in US soccer. Sure, they're not coaching their national teams because, other problems. But they're in the development pathway and doing very well. I believe those coaches need to be helping Caribbean teams with their infrastructure development and pass that information on to Caribbean coaches so that we can start this revolution of education.
Lenny, I'm looking on your photo there, BSMA, Black Soccer Membership Association. What is that all about?
That's the black coaches here in the United States. We're under a Black Soccer Coaches organization, which we help each other to get their education. And most of these people are in the college ranks or in the U.S. soccer youth development ranks. And it's a way of organizing ourselves to say, look, we're here. We try to reach into the underserved communities to save our own people and to help bring them up through the national development youth programs, identify them, and do whatever we can to make sure that our folks are being highlighted in one way or the other. So it's an organization of black coaches that are here in the United States.
Lenny, the Island Cup coming on board, do you think that we can be able to force some of your ideas that you're talking about? Because already you have a number of associations who are trying to see if they could also fight against the Island Cup Open for one reason or the other.
Well, for where I'm concerned, that's misplaced priorities. You need to embrace people who wants to help, and as long as they want to help, I think you should open the door. Through colonialism, sometimes we don't believe that our own can help us. We believe that the help has to come from someplace else. And until we realize that only us is going to save ourselves, we will continue on this merry-go-round. We must recognize nobody's coming to save us. We have to save ourselves. Until that is realized, I do believe that they will be struggling in the Caribbean.
Island Cup, Lenny, as you said, everyone here in the Caribbean, barring the COVID-19 restrictions.
I bark right here.
Yeah.
I leave this to you. I leave this to you.
So we're talking to Lenny Taylor, one of the top administrators. We're just having a little difficulty there with him enjoying a conversation. We're back with you, Lenny.
Yes, I'm with you.
Okay, all right. We were just talking
Never
now.
left.
We know it is with the family connection in terms of what's happening. We were just touching now to figure out, as you rightly said, once everything protocols go all right, to have your team maybe quietly move into the Caribbean to see if we could also select some players. Hopefully, if not for the first season, the second season of the Island Cup.
Yes, absolutely. I think the 16 and 17-year-old players must be identified. I remember back in the 60s, Santos of Brazil came to Jamaica to play the all-school Jamaican team. And one of the Brazilians says, up until 16, well, I heard Pelé says that with his own mouth. Up until 15, 16, the Caribbean kid has the same potential as the Brazilian kid. The difference is that the Brazilian kid is in a structured environment and he's able to grow. So I do believe that if we get those 16 and 17-year-old kids and put them in a good environment with good training, good education, they can be world beaters because we've got the strength, we've got the speed, we have the determination, we have all the other things for football except the finer attributes of the game. So if we can put the finer attributes with our natural gifts that we have, I believe that we can be world beaters. And also, the Caribbean is the only, for me, the only place that is not as developed in FIFA. So what we're doing something wrong. And even though we have the courses and all that's going on, we still need more because we're still not competing very, very well. So I think if the Cup can find these kids and give them a pathway, we can develop millionaires coming out of the Caribbean. Millionaires. It is showed with Sterling. We can. But there's something that is very wrong with our football that needs to be fixed. And I am hoping, maybe some people, are hearing what I'm saying and not just passing it off. We have potential multi-millionaires walking in our streets, walking around, who could be top ball players in the world. They need to be harnessed.
Your final message, Lenny, to the young boys and girls as part of what you would consider to be a realistic dream, the Island Cup Open, which is coming to the Caribbean. And, you just want to be able to make sure that folks who are listening to our program, we continue to educate them that, there's a pathway, there's something coming their way, so there's still hope. Your final words.
Yes, there's hope. We are hoping that this can be another element of development for our region. It is not about to take over what's being done in the Caribbean. It's an addition. So I'm saying, open your hearts, open your eyes, and see that these young players need the assistant to get to the game, to the top of the game that they love. Let me say there are 4 things that is waiting for the boys and girls in the Caribbean. It's the gun, drugs, jail, cemetery. Those 4 things. If we don't keep them busy, keep their dreams alive, these things will pull them away, which is going to be difficult for our society. So football is a powerful tool to help us with what's happening in our region. The life you save through football may be your own. I'm saying football organization, open up your hearts, open up your mind. Let's let these kids have an opportunity for a future. And we all have to work together in order for it to work. So with that, I hope I could touch someone's heart this morning to say, football is a powerful tool that can help with making our society a better one to live in.
Lenny Taylor, we've been in this sports struggle for a long time. And, we just want to really applaud you this morning for your contribution to football development, because you've touched so many lives around and you've always concentrated on coaching education. And to be part of the Island Cup Open, with, the movement being Black Lives Matter, kick poverty out, because that's the mission.
Absolutely.
That is the mission, as you were talking about. Absolutely. To be able to embrace so that young boys and girls can be part of the success. We want to really thank you very much and to continue to support the Island Cup Open, people like Chris Anderson and his entire management staff and team, as we get ready to try to see if we could change the concept and the way thinking of making sure that we treat young boys and girls and give them an opportunity to earn something. I find that the sports administrators today, the modern day sports administrators today, seem not to be able to understand the business of sports, as you rightly said. And maybe it's through this medium that we can try and see if we can change that concept.
Yes, and it's so important. And I want to thank you and Mr. Epelos this morning for having me on your program. And if we can touch someone's heart to help these kids, I would be happy to know that we, the elders, have put down a marker to say, let's get it together. Let's go Caribbean. We've got tremendous amount of talent. Let's put it all together and let's compete and give these kids an opportunity. As I said to the kids in St. Kitts Nevis, buy your mama a big house on the hill. Drive a Mercedes Benz. Be a trendsetter. Be a leader. If we do that, other kids will follow. But we must give them the opportunity to do so.
God bless you, my brother. Stay safe. And, you know, anytime our program, our doors is always open.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. You have a wonderful day and keep up the fantastic work that you guys are doing.
All right. Thank you very much, Lenny. So there we heard it from one of the top Caribbean coaches, Epplus, who migrated and developed himself, came back, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, St. Kitts and Nevis, and still applying his trade and looking to be able to make a pathway forward.